Mayor had a really strong six months of fundraising, bringing in more than $1 million. So even though his challengers have brought in respectable sums in a short period of time, Adams is still far and away a leader on the fundraising front.
You know, we have 5 months left in this year. I'm curious as to what Bridget Bergen will be looking out for, what she'll be watching for going forward, because we're talking about 2025. It's not that far away, and plenty of people have already indicated they're interested in running for mayor.
Well, that's true. And so, is there any fallout from these investigations? Does anything slow down the Adams campaign? Does anyone else jump in the race? We've heard some other names mentioned. Former Governor Andrew Cuomo, State Senator Jessica Ramos, former Council Speaker Christine Quinn. Or does anybody bow out of the race? And, there's another filing deadline coming up in October. These candidates are going to be fundraising throughout the summer, but it's December when we find out how much they actually receive in public matching funds. That's going to be a crucial date.
WNYC's senior politics, Bridget Bergen, on it this morning. Once again, Bridget, thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Support for WNYC comes from Plaza Jewish Community Chapel, owned and operated by the Jewish community, located at 91st Street in Amsterdam, offering a full range of funeral services, including arrangements in advance. More information at plazajewishcommunitychapel.org.
Marketplace Morning Report is coming up next, and then in 10 minutes at 9 o'clock, it's the BBC NewsHour on WNYC. Let's check in with London and see what they're working on. Hello, London.
Good morning, WNYC. I'm Rebecca Kesby, and on today's NewsHour, as J.D. Vance is named as Trump's running mate, we speak to his college roommate. A Kenyan serial killer charged with 40 murders is described as a vampire by police, and we go to a unique rainforest in Mozambique, now a conservation area. That's BBC NewsHour coming up at 9 on WNYC.
The economic leanings of the man who's just become Republican number 2.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by C3 Generative AI. Verified, traceable answers, secure, hallucination-free, LLM agnostic, IP liability-free. Learn more at c3.ai.
I'm David Brancaccio in New York. If the Trump-Vance ticket emerges the winner in November, let's look at what we know about Vice President J.D. Vance's views on spending, jobs, and government's role in business and trade. Hint, Vance sees a big role for government. I spoke with Scott Lincicome this morning. He's Vice President of General Economics and Trade at the libertarian-leaning Cato Institute. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
We know where J.D. Vance is on Ukraine spending. He's led the charge against more of it and wants Ukraine to settle with Russia. But what about what some would call industrial policy? Do we have any sense?
J.D. Vance is an advocate of industrial policy, reflecting a pretty strong turn for most of the Republican Party from one of mostly free markets to a much more interventionist, a much more populist economic mindset, really going out there and picking winners and losers in the market to apply, taxes and subsidies and whatever it takes to build that industry as the politician sees fit.
And one of the tools there, you alluded to it, is trade policy, but also tariffs. Donald Trump rejects the view of nearly every economist that tariffs are paid for by consumers and can be inflationary. J.D. Vance, he's not an economist. Any sense he has a more nuanced view of this?
It doesn't seem so. He seems to be an equally potent advocate for using tariffs to do things like reduce the trade deficit and, of course, protect American companies and workers. Vance being from Ohio, he's been a strong advocate for the steel tariffs on those grounds. Now, as you said, the economics of that say a different story. They say the tariffs don't work very well. They do raise prices. But for Vance, much like Trump, he's ignoring that and really focusing on that very narrow benefit for a company or a set of workers.
J.D. Vance knows something about Silicon Valley. He's a venture capital guy who's worked with Palantir tycoon Peter Thiel. Think he'll be tech-friendly when others are pushing to rein in those companies?
Well, it seems that he won't be that friendly. He's praised Federal Trade Commissioner Lina Khan's approach to antitrust regulation, which has really heavily focused on breaking up big tech, companies blocking tech mergers. And Vance's view is that she's doing a great job and that these tech companies do need more government regulation. But nevertheless, it is anything but a light touch regulatory approach when it comes to big tech.
I suppose, Scott, there are vice presidents and there are vice presidents. Some are stuck at the margins of policies when they get into office. Others, like Dick Cheney under the second President Bush, are central. I guess we'll have to see if the Trump-Vance ticket prevails later this year, just what role Vance would have in policy.
Particularly given how limited J.D. Vance's experience is in Washington and in policymaking. We're also seeing a pretty radical conversion from policy views that he held in just 2016 and 2017. So the extent to which J.D. Vance is a major player in policymaking remains to be seen.
Scott Lincicome, Vice President of General Economics and Trade with the Cato Institute. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
News retail sales were flat in June with forecasts of a drop that's stronger than expected. Dow futures are up 0.4%, S&P and NASDAQ futures up 0.3%.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Schwab. With Schwab investing themes, people can invest in ideas they believe in, like artificial intelligence, renewable energy, pet passion, and more. Over 40 themes to choose from. More at schwab.com.
Now to the U.S. Secret Service and what they could have done to protect a former president and current candidate. As formal investigations get underway, our Kimberly Adams has more on its funding and structure.
Over the weekend, members of Congress introduced new legislation to expand Secret Service protection for presidential candidates. And agency leadership says they'll cooperate with congressional investigations of Saturday's attack. The Secret Service actually has something of a dual mandate, says Richard Forno. He's the assistant director of the Center for Cybersecurity at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County.
Protecting the president is certainly their highest profile job.
In addition to the president, vice president, and their families, the service also protects former presidents, their families, high-ranking government officials, and foreign dignitaries.
But the Secret Service also has a long history in going after financial crimes, bank fraud, counterfeiting, credit card fraud, some cybersecurity-related things related to fraud.
Forno says since there are more of those crimes nowadays, the costs of those investigations have been going up, along with the size of the Secret Service's budget. Thomas Hyslop used to work for the Secret Service and now teaches in the Department of Criminology at the University of South Florida.
In the last 4 years, the protective budget has went up 20% and the investigation budget has went up 12%. And a lot of that has to do with the increased threat level, large families, and then the amount of travel.
Hyslop says presidents and their families travel a lot more than they used to. Of the almost $3 billion President Biden has requested for the 2025 Secret Service budget, Hyslop says about $1.3 billion would go to protection and around $800 million for investigations. Last year, the agency got what it requested and more. But Hyslop anticipates all these congressional investigations may prompt a fresh look into what the Secret Service is doing versus what it should be doing.
Should the Secret Service continue this dual mission role, or can their investigative missions go to a different agency and let the Secret Service focus exclusively on protection?
The House Oversight Committee has asked the head of the Secret Service to come testify at a special hearing next week. In Washington, I'm Kimberly Adams for Marketplace.
And to the T-shirt market, specifically one with the photo of Donald Trump pumping the fist after being grazed by the bullet this weekend. That T-shirt is flying out of online shopping warehouses. The one in question features an Associated Press photo to which the vendor reportedly does not have rights. Separately, the Times of India reports, a version went on sale in China via the shopping site Taobao within hours of the shooting, in which one person died and two people in the crowd were seriously wounded. In New York, I'm David Brancaccio, Marketplace Morning Report. From APM, American Public Media.